Vegas Aces. Check it out.
All right, y'all. Great job. Great job. We did a lot of great things. I'm sure this has to be a season low 7 turnovers. Wow. You take care of the ball, you give yourself a chance, right? 13.
You take care of the ball, you give yourselves a chance. Team low, 7 turnovers, huh?
Stephanie White just looked into a camera, stood in front of her entire locker room, and took a deliberate, calculated, absolutely undeniable shot at Caitlin Clark, the franchise player who is supposed to be the cornerstone of everything the Indiana Fever are building. Let me say that again so it sinks in for every single person watching this video. Stephanie White, the head coach, the woman who was brought in specifically to unlock Caitlin Clark's generational talent. She just stood in that locker room after a win against the Las Vegas Aces. A win that happened without Caitlin Clark on the floor, and she made sure to highlight the one statistical category that critics have been using to attack Caitlin all season long. Turnovers, 7 turnovers, season low. She said it with cameras rolling, she said it with intention, and she said it knowing exactly what message that would send to the media, to the fans, and most importantly, to Caitlin Clark herself. Welcome back. This is Hoops Vision, and today we are ripping the doors off the most blatant, most disrespectful, most telling moment of coaching malpractice we have seen all season, because what Stephanie White just did in that locker room is not leadership. It is sabotage.
I'm sure this has to be a season low 7 turnovers. Wow. You take care of the ball, you give yourself a chance, right? 13 offensive rebounds. Extra possessions matter. We out-rebounded them 39-30. Really good stuff. First quarter, y'all, they shot 62%. By the second quarter, we had them down to 45. By the third quarter, down to 40. And we ended the game in the 40s. And third quarter, 26-14. We came out of the gate ready to go. Okay, all of that matters. All of that matters. We were resilient early in the first quarter, and then we continued to climb throughout the rest of the game.
Before we get into what Stephanie White said word for word, before we break down the context that makes this moment so much worse than it already appears on the surface, I need you to understand the stakes here. This is not just about one comment. This is not just about one post-game speech. This is about a pattern of behavior that has been building for weeks, a pattern that I have been documenting on this channel since the moment Stephanie White took this job, and a pattern that is now reaching a breaking point that could fundamentally alter the future of the Indiana Fever franchise. By the 9-minute mark of this video, I am going to show you the receipts that prove Stephanie White has been building a system designed to minimize Caitlin Clark, not maximize her. But first, you need to see the moment that started all of this. The moment Stephanie White walked into that locker room and decided to take her shot. And here is the context that nobody on TV is willing to give you. The Indiana Fever just beat the Las Vegas Aces. Caitlin Clark did not play, she was resting. The Fever had 7 turnovers as a team, 7, and Stephanie White in her very first sentence to the team after the win made sure to point that out. Not the defensive effort, not the rebounding, not the ball movement. Turnovers. The one thing Caitlin Clark gets criticized for more than anything else. The one thing the haters use to discredit her. The one thing Stephanie White knows is a pressure point, and she went right at it. Let me tell you what the establishment does not want you to focus on. The Aces were checked out. Kelsey Plum looked disinterested. Chelsea Gray was moving like she had a piano strapped to her back. Aja Wilson did not even play. This was a Las Vegas team that was already thinking about their week off, already thinking about vacation, already mentally out of the building. And the Fever beat them by playing basic, fundamental basketball against a team that did not want to be there. That is the reality. But Stephanie White stood in front of her team and framed it like they had just won the championship. Like they had just unlocked some revolutionary formula. Like they had just proven something definitive about how this team should be built going forward.
You hear that? Constantly growing with my group. My group. Kelsey Mitchell team, y'all. The Indiana Fever have let it be known at every turn they're building this thing around Kelsey Mitchell. This is Kelsey Mitchell team. She's let it be known, hey, I'm growing with my group. This is my group. All right, y'all can keep acting like y'all don't know what's...
She said it with cameras rolling. After what we just watched in that game, she said that to the media. Let me say it back to you in case you missed it because of what it proves about where Stephanie White's head is at right now. She said, I'm sure this has to be a season low 7 turnovers. You take care of the ball, you give yourselves a chance. 7 turnovers, season low, you take care of the ball. Those are not neutral words. Those are not generic coaching observations. Those are pointed, deliberate, calculated words designed to send a very specific message. And the message is this: when Caitlin Clark is not on the floor, this team takes care of the ball better. When Caitlin Clark is not on the floor, this team plays the way Stephanie White wants them to play. When Caitlin Clark is not on the floor, this team wins the way Stephanie White wants them to win. And you know what makes this so much worse? The point guard play in that game was absolutely terrible. Raven Johnson was okay at best. Tia Harris went 0 for 4. 4 points in 26 minutes. 4. That is the point guard production Stephanie White is celebrating. That is the offensive execution Stephanie White is holding up as the standard. Let me be entirely clear with you. This was not a masterclass in ball security. This was a game where the Fever barely had to do anything offensively because the Aces were not even trying to defend. But Stephanie White saw an opportunity. She saw an opportunity to take a shot at Caitlin Clark. She saw an opportunity to plant a seed. She saw an opportunity to start building the narrative that this team is better without their franchise player. And she took it. Now, I want every single person watching this video to sit with that for a second. Sit with the fact that the head coach of the Indiana Fever, the woman who is supposed to be protecting her star player, the woman who is supposed to be building a system that maximizes Caitlin Clark's generational talent, just went out of her way to highlight a stat that makes Caitlin look bad. Sit with that. Because what comes next is going to make you understand that this was not an accident. This was not a slip of the tongue. This was intentional. This was calculated. And this was part of a much larger plan that Stephanie White has been executing since the day she walked into that building.
Listen, man, Stephanie White and the Indiana Fever have clearly made the decision. They're building this team around Kelsey Mitchell. They have built a team to play without Caitlin Clark. They built a team to play without Caitlin Clark better than they built a team to play with her. I think it's very apparent. I think it was intentional. I think it's very intentional what they've done. And this just needs to end. You know what I mean? I'm just ready for Caitlin to part ways. The Indiana Fever clearly want to go in a different direction, and that's the decision they've made.
Let me take you through what happened after that locker room moment, because this is where the mask fully comes off. Stephanie White went to the podium. She did her post-game press conference, and she doubled down. She did not walk it back. She did not clarify. She did not soften the message. She leaned into it. She talked about defensive possessions. She talked about rebounding. She talked about the third quarter run. And then, when she had the chance to give Caitlin Clark credit for the culture she has built, for the foundation she has laid, for the work she has put in all season long, Stephanie White pivoted. She pivoted to Kelsey Mitchell. She pivoted to my group. She pivoted to the players who fit her system, the players who play her way, the players who do not disrupt the archaic, outdated, absolutely baffling offensive philosophy that Stephanie White is trying to force onto this roster. And here is the part that should terrify every single Caitlin Clark fan watching this video. The Indiana Fever front office has been completely silent. Not one statement, not one clarification, not one public show of support for their franchise player. They are letting Stephanie White run this narrative unchecked. They are letting Stephanie White build the case that this team is better without Caitlin Clark. They are letting Stephanie White create the permission structure to move on from the most popular, most talented, most marketable player in the entire league. And every single one of them is complicit. The general manager, the assistant coaches, the ownership group, every single one of them is watching this happen in real time, and they are staying silent. Let me tell you what this reminds me of, because I have seen this movie before. I have seen franchises sabotage their own stars because the star does not fit the coach's ego. I have seen front offices choose loyalty to a coach over loyalty to a generational talent. I have seen organizations convince themselves that they can win without their best player because winning without that player validates the system, validates the coaching staff, validates the decision makers who built the roster. And every single time it ends the same way. The star leaves. The franchise collapses, and the people who made the decision spend the next decade trying to rebuild what they destroyed. That is where the Indiana Fever are headed right now. That is the road Stephanie White is walking them down. And the most frustrating part, the part that absolutely irks my nerves, is that this was completely avoidable. Caitlin Clark is not a difficult player to coach. She is not a locker room problem. She is not a selfish scorer. She is a willing passer. A high IQ playmaker, a player who makes everyone around her better when you give her the freedom to operate. But Stephanie White does not want to give her that freedom. Stephanie White wants to run her system. Stephanie White wants to control the pace. Stephanie White wants to prove that she can win her way. And Caitlin Clark is the obstacle standing in the way of that vision.
Biggest aces, check it out.
All right, y'all, great job. Great job. We did a lot of great things. I'm sure this has to be a season low 7 turnovers. Wow. You take care of the ball, you give yourself a chance, right? 13.
You take care of the ball, you give yourselves a chance. Team low, 7 turnovers, huh?
Listen to what she just said. Listen to the pride in her voice. 13 offensive rebounds. Possessions matter. Rebounding matters. First quarter, they shot 62%. By the second quarter, we had them down to 45. By the third quarter, down to 40, and we ended the game in the 40s. Third quarter, 26-14. We came out of the gate ready to go. She is celebrating a win over a Las Vegas Aces team that was already on vacation. She is celebrating a win where the point guard production was 4 points in 26 minutes. She is celebrating a win where the offensive execution was so bad that the only reason they won was because the Aces did not care enough to defend. But here is what she is really celebrating. She is celebrating the validation. She is celebrating the proof point. She is celebrating the narrative that her system works when Caitlin Clark is not in the building to disrupt it. Because that is what Stephanie White believes. She believes Caitlin Clark disrupts her system. She believes Caitlin Clark's turnovers are a bigger problem than Caitlin Clark's 30 points and 12 assists. She believes the 7 turnovers the Fever had in this one game against a checked-out Aces team are more important than the wins Caitlin Clark has delivered all season long against teams that were actually trying. And you know what the saddest part is? Stephanie White is not even hiding it anymore. She is saying it out loud. She is saying it on camera. She is saying it in front of her team, in front of the media, in front of the entire league. And the reason she is comfortable saying it out loud is because she knows the Indiana Fever front office is not going to stop her. She knows the establishment is not going to push back. She knows the people who actually run this league are perfectly fine with a narrative that diminishes Caitlin Clark, because Caitlin Clark represents everything the old guard is afraid of. She represents change. She represents disruption. She represents a future where the traditional coaching philosophies, the traditional offensive systems, the traditional power structures are no longer relevant.
I'm sure this has to be a season low 7 turnovers. You take care of the ball, you give yourself a chance, right? 13 offensive rebounds. Extra possessions matter. We out-rebounded them 39-30. Really good stuff. First quarter, y'all, they shot 62%. By the second quarter, we had them down to 45. By the third quarter, down to 40. And we ended the game in the 40s. And third quarter, 26-14. We came out of the gate ready to go. Okay, all of that matters. All of that matters. We were resilient early in the first quarter, and then we continued to climb throughout the rest of the game.
Now let me take you through the 4 reasons why this moment is so much more dangerous than it looks on the surface, because this is not just about one comment. This is about a tactical failure, a pattern of behavior, enabler complicity, and the cost to Caitlin Clark's prime. And by the time we get through all 4, you are going to understand exactly why I am about to stake 5 predictions that are going to define the rest of this season. Pass 1, the tactical failure. What Stephanie White did in that locker room was not coaching. That was not motivation. That was not team building. That was a deliberate attempt to undermine the confidence of the franchise player by celebrating a performance that happened in her absence. Let me explain why that is so destructive. When you are coaching a superstar, your job is to protect that player from external criticism. Your job is to create a safe space where that player can take risks, make mistakes, and grow without fear of public humiliation. Your job is to be the shield between your star and the noise. Stephanie White just did the opposite. She became the noise. She became the critic. She became the person pointing out the turnovers, highlighting the mistakes, building the case that the team is better without the star. That is not coaching. That is sabotage. And here is what makes it even worse. Caitlin Clark was not even in the building. She was resting. She was taking care of her body. She was doing exactly what the coaching staff told her to do. And while she was resting, her head coach stood in front of the team and used her absence as a teaching moment about ball security. Let me say that again. Stephanie White used Caitlin Clark's absence as a teaching moment about ball security. That is a betrayal. That is a violation of trust. That is the kind of move that fractures the relationship between a coach and a player in a way that can never be fully repaired. Pass 2. The pattern of behavior. This is not the first time Stephanie White has done this. This is not the first time she has taken a subtle shot at Caitlin Clark. This is not the first time she has framed the team's success in a way that minimizes Caitlin's contributions. I have been documenting this for weeks on this channel, and the receipts are piling up. 3 weeks ago, after a win where Caitlin Clark had 28 points and 10 assists, Stephanie White spent the entire post-game press conference talking about defensive rotations. 2 weeks ago, after a loss where Caitlin Clark was the only player who showed up, Stephanie White blamed the turnovers. 1 week ago, after a win where Caitlin Clark orchestrated the entire fourth quarter comeback, Stephanie White credited the role players. 3 games, 3 identical patterns. 3 times where Caitlin Clark delivered and Stephanie White found a way to shift the credit somewhere else. And now, after a game where Caitlin Clark did not even play, Stephanie White is celebrating the turnovers. The pattern is undeniable. The pattern is deliberate. The pattern is designed to build a narrative that this team does not need Caitlin Clark to win. And the reason Stephanie White is building that narrative is because she wants the freedom to move on. She wants the freedom to build her team around Kelsey Mitchell. She wants the freedom to run her system without the disruption of a generational talent who plays a different way. Pass 3. Enabler complicity. Let me tell you who else is responsible for this disaster. The Indiana Fever front office, the assistant coaches, the ownership group. Every single person in that organization who has watched Stephanie White undermine Caitlin Clark for weeks and has done nothing to stop it. Every single person who has stayed silent while the head coach builds a case to move on from the franchise player. Every single person who has allowed this toxic dynamic to fester without intervention. They are all complicit. They are all enablers. And they are all gambling with the future of the franchise because they are too afraid to hold Stephanie White accountable. And here is what makes their silence so damning. Caitlin Clark is not just the best player on the Indiana Fever. She's the most popular player in the entire league. She's the player who is driving ticket sales, driving merchandise sales, driving TV ratings. She is the player who is single-handedly elevating the profile of the WNBA. And the Indiana Fever front office is allowing their head coach to publicly undermine her. That is not just bad coaching, that is bad business, that is organizational malpractice, that is the kind of decision that haunts a franchise for a generation. Pass 4. The cost to Caitlin Clark's prime. Let me tell you what this is really about. This is about time. Caitlin Clark is in her prime right now. She is at the peak of her physical abilities, at the peak of her basketball IQ, at the peak of her marketability. And every single day that she spends in a system that is designed to minimize her, every single day that she spends playing for a coach who does not believe in her, every single day that she spends in an organization that is willing to sacrifice her for the sake of validating a coaching philosophy, that is a day of her prime that is being wasted. That is a day of her career that she will never get back. That is a day that could have been spent winning championships, breaking records, building a legacy. And instead, it is being spent in a locker room where her own head coach is celebrating the fact that the team had fewer turnovers when she was not on the floor. That is what Caitlin Clark's prime is being burned for. That is the cost of Stephanie White's ego. That is the price of the Indiana Fever front office's cowardice. And that is why this moment is so much bigger than one comment in one locker room after one game.
You hear that? Constantly growing with my group. My group. Kelsey Mitchell team, y'all. The Indiana Fever have let it be known at every turn they're building this thing around Kelsey Mitchell. This is Kelsey Mitchell team. She's let it be known, hey, I'm growing with my group. This is my group. All right, y'all can keep acting like y'all don't know what's.
Did you hear that? Did you hear what Stephanie White just said? Constantly growing with my group, my group. Not our group, not the team, not the franchise, my group. She is drawing a line. She's making it clear who is in and who is out. She's making it clear that Kelsey Mitchell is her player, that this is Kelsey Mitchell's team, that the Indiana Fever are being built around Kelsey Mitchell's skill set and Stephanie White's system. And the implication is obvious. Caitlin Clark is not part of my group. Caitlin Clark is not part of the vision. Caitlin Clark is the outsider, the disruptor, the player who does not fit. And let me tell you why that language is so revealing. When a coach starts using possessive language like my group, it means they have already made a decision about who they want to build around. It means they have already decided who fits their system and who does not. It means they have already drawn the battle lines for the internal power struggle that is about to define the next 6 months of this franchise. Stephanie White just told you everything you need to know. She's building around Kelsey Mitchell. She's building a system that works without Caitlin Clark. She's building a narrative that gives the front office permission to trade the franchise player. And before you tell me I am overreacting, before you tell me I am reading too much into one comment, let me show you the receipt that nobody on TV is willing to play for you. Because of what it proves about where this is all headed.
Listen, man, Stephanie White and the Indiana Fever have clearly made the decision. They're building this team around Kelsey Mitchell. They have built a team to play without Caitlin Clark. They built a team to play without Caitlin Clark better than they built a team to play with her. I think it's very apparent. I think it was intentional. I think it's very intentional what they've done. And this just needs to end. You know what I mean? I'm just ready for Caitlin to part ways. The Indiana Fever clearly want to go in a different direction, and that's the decision they've made.
There it is. There is the confession. The Indiana Fever have clearly made the decision. They are building this team around Kelsey Mitchell. They have built a team to play without Caitlin Clark. They built a team to play without Caitlin Clark better than they built a team to play with her. I think it's very apparent. I think it was intentional. I think it's very intentional what they've done. Listen to that language. Listen to the certainty. Listen to the conviction. This is not speculation. This is not a hot take. This is someone who has been watching this organization up close, who has been reading the tea leaves, who has been documenting the pattern, and who is now ready to say out loud what everyone else is too afraid to admit. The Indiana Fever have made a decision. They are building around Kelsey Mitchell. They are preparing to move on from Caitlin Clark. And you know what the most damning part of that clip is? The phrase better than they built a team to play with her. That is not an accident. That is not a throwaway line. That is a direct indictment of the roster construction, the coaching philosophy, the organizational priorities. The Indiana Fever have spent more time, more energy, more resources building a system that works without Caitlin Clark than they have building a system that maximizes Caitlin Clark. That is the reality. That is the truth that nobody in the establishment wants you to focus on. And that is the reason why this moment in the locker room is so much more significant than it appears on the surface. Now let me lay out the 5 predictions that are going to define the rest of this season, because this is where we separate the truth from the noise. This is where we put our credibility on the line. This is where we stake claims that you can come back and check in 6 weeks, in 3 months at the end of the season. And if I am wrong, you can roast me in the comments. But if I am right, I want every single person watching this video to remember that you heard it here first. Prediction 1, Stephanie White's job security. If Stephanie White is still the head coach of the Indiana Fever by the start of next season, I want every single person to come back and roast me in the comments. Because here is what I believe is going to happen. The Indiana Fever are going to miss the playoffs, or they are going to get bounced in the first round, and the front office is going to have a decision to make. Do they keep the coach who has been systematically undermining their franchise player, or do they cut their losses and start over? And my prediction is that they are going to choose Stephanie White over Caitlin Clark. They are going to convince themselves that the problem is the player, not the coach. They are going to convince themselves that Kelsey Mitchell is the future. And they are going to give Stephanie White another year to prove that her system works. That is my prediction. Save this clip. Prediction 2, Caitlin Clark's next move. On the day the season ends, we are going to see Caitlin Clark request a meeting with the front office. We are going to see her sit down with the general manager, with the ownership group, with the people who actually make the decisions. And we are going to see her lay out an ultimatum. Either you build a system that maximizes my talent, or you trade me to a team that will. That is what is coming. That is the conversation that is going to happen behind closed doors. And my prediction is that the Indiana Fever are going to choose the system over the player. They are going to choose Stephanie White over Caitlin Clark, and by this time next year, Caitlin Clark is going to be wearing a different uniform. Mark this video. Prediction 3, Kelsey Mitchell's role. Meanwhile, Kelsey Mitchell is going to sign a contract extension with the Indiana Fever before the end of the calendar year. The front office is going to make it official. They are going to announce that Kelsey Mitchell is the cornerstone of the franchise, that Kelsey Mitchell is the player they are building around, that Kelsey Mitchell is the future. And they are going to frame it as a positive move, as a commitment to continuity, as a vote of confidence in the direction of the team. But what it really is a signal that they have chosen Stephanie White's system over Caitlin Clark's talent, a signal that they have chosen the coach over the star, a signal that the Caitlin Clark era in Indiana is over. Watch the next 2 weeks. Prediction 4, the news cycle direction. The story is going to break wide open when a major national outlet runs the article they are already sitting on. Someone at ESPN, someone at The Athletic, someone with credibility and sources is going to publish a deep dive into the dysfunction inside the Indiana Fever locker room. They are going to interview anonymous players. They are going to interview anonymous coaches. They are going to interview anonymous front office executives. And they are going to lay out the entire timeline of how Stephanie White systematically undermined Caitlin Clark, how the front office enabled it, and how the franchise made the decision to move on from their generational talent. That article is coming. It is already being written. And when it drops, it is going to confirm everything I have been telling you on this channel for weeks. Prediction 5, the franchise outcome. And the season ends with the Indiana Fever missing the playoffs entirely or getting swept in the first round, and Stephanie White standing at a podium talking about moral victories, talking about growth, talking about the foundation they are building. And Caitlin Clark is going to be sitting at home watching it on TV, knowing that she wasted another year of her prime in an organization that never believed in her. That is how this ends. That is the outcome we are headed toward. That is the future the Indiana Fever are building. Mark this video. Save this timestamp. Come back in 3 months and tell me I was wrong. I will be waiting. But here is the part that nobody is talking about. Here is the part that makes this so much more tragic than it already is. Caitlin Clark is still showing up. She is still putting in the work. She is still being a professional. She is still being a leader. She is still doing everything you could possibly ask of a franchise player, even though her own head coach is publicly undermining her, even though her own front office is staying silent, even though the entire organization is preparing to move on without her. And that, to me, is the most telling detail of all, because it shows you who Caitlin Clark is. It shows you what she is made of. It shows you that she is not going to let Stephanie White break her. She is not going to let the Indiana Fever front office define her legacy. She is not going to let this dysfunction steal her joy. And when Caitlin Clark eventually leaves Indiana, when she eventually finds a coach who believes in her, when she eventually finds an organization that is willing to build a system around her generational talent, she's going to win a championship. She's going to break every record. She's going to build a legacy that makes the Indiana Fever look like the biggest organizational failure in WNBA history. And Stephanie White is going to be the answer to a trivia question. She's going to be the coach who had Caitlin Clark and could not figure out how to win with her. She's going to be the cautionary tale that every front office uses when they are deciding whether to hire a coach with an ego bigger than their vision. That is the future we are looking at. That is the legacy Stephanie White is building. That is the cost of choosing a system over a superstar. And that is why this moment in the locker room, this comment about 7 turnovers, this celebration of a win that happened without the franchise player, that is why it matters so much. Because it is not just one comment. It is the beginning of the end. Now I need you to do 3 things before you click off this video, because this is where the conversation really starts. This is where we turn this from a one-way broadcast into a 2-way dialogue. This is where you get to tell me if I am right, if I am wrong, if I am missing something, if I am seeing something that nobody else is willing to admit. Layer 1, the forced choice. Drop your most honest take in the comments. Is Stephanie White systematically undermining Caitlin Clark to protect her own ego and validate her own system? Or is this all just overblown drama and I am reading way too much into one locker room comment? Pick a side, defend it, tell me why you think I am right or why you think I am completely off base. I want to hear from every single person watching this video. Layer 2, the receipts demand. And while you are down there, save this comment. I just predicted that Caitlin Clark is going to request a trade by the end of the season. If I am right by the time the playoffs are over, come back and tell me. If I am wrong, roast me. I am putting my credibility on the line. I am staking my reputation on this prediction, and I want you to hold me accountable. Layer 3, the tag a friend. Tag the friend who keeps telling you that Stephanie White is a great coach, that the Indiana Fever are building something special, that Caitlin Clark just needs to be more patient. Make them watch this video, make them look at the receipts, make them explain how celebrating 7 turnovers in a game where your franchise player did not even play is good coaching. I want to see what they say, and here is what is coming next. Tomorrow, we are going to break down the Indiana Fever's next game. We are going to watch how Stephanie White coaches Caitlin Clark after this locker room moment. We are going to watch how the dynamic has shifted. We are going to watch whether Caitlin Clark comes out aggressive or whether she comes out passive. We are going to watch whether Stephanie White gives her the freedom to operate or whether she tightens the leash even more. If you are not subscribed, you are going to miss it. Hit the bell because this story is just getting started. This is Hoops Vision. We will see you in the next video.